Hello, and welcome to the College of Communication Arts and Sciences virtual talk on human resources. My name is Matthew Jones, and I serve MSU in the College of ComArtSci as the Assistant Director for Alumni Relations. And thank you for attending today. While this is a webinar, we highly encourage you to ask questions you have throughout the panel discussion, and that can be done through the Q&A feature or the chat feature in your menu bar. We will reserve time for those questions as appropriate or towards the end of the discussion. It is my privilege to introduce our moderator for today. Dr. Jim Deering is the Brandt Endowed Professor in the Department of Communications at Michigan State University. Dr. Deering studies the diffusion of innovations, including the adoption and implementation of new evidence-based practices, programs, technologies, and policies. His research and teaching spans dissemination science, implementation science, program sustainability, and the psychological and sociological basis of the diffusion process. He works with research and practice improvement teams in environmental remediation, nursing care, water conservation, injury and fatality prevention, public health, and healthcare. Dr. Deering, thank you so much for moderating today.
Thank you, Matthew. It's a pleasure to be with you this afternoon. I am especially appreciative of the staff at ComArtSci Talks, Matthew and colleagues, for putting on this webinar with us. And of course, expressing gratitude to our three panelists today, Laura Lawson, Gary Lamont, and Ronald Moore. Laura, if I could ask you first to please introduce yourself to our listeners.
Hi, of course, I'm Laura Lawson. I'm Chief People Officer of UWM, which stands for United Wholesale Mortgage. We are based in Pontiac, and I am a 9-9 advertising major from state, very proud Spartan. And before being at UWM, I was on producing team for the Ellen DeGeneres Show. I have a big background in TV production, and I am obsessed with creativity and taking care of people.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Laura. Ronald, how about you?
Sure. So Ronald Moore, got my BA in Communication Arts in 1975 and went back to grad school a couple of years later and got a master's in education and then a master's in labor and industrial relations. I'm retired as of 2016. My last job was HR VP for a nonprofit in New York City called Safe Horizon. We dealt with victims of violence. And before that, I had a 26-year career with Hewlett Packard in various HR roles, living in 5 different cities.
Very good. Thank you, Ronald. And Gary Lamont.
Hi, good afternoon. Yes, I got my BA in 1981 in advertising and then followed that up with an MBA and Master's in Labor and Industrial Relations, similar to Ronald. I just recently retired from Raytheon Technologies, where I was a CHRO in a couple of the divisions, as well as heading up the joint Raytheon United Technologies HR team for the merger that we just recently completed about a year ago. Always thought my ComSci background really positioned me well to be in HR in my various assignments because of the close working relationship or responsibility that I had with the employee comms teams in those companies I worked at in technology and the energy industry primarily in my career.
Perfect. Thank you, Gary. Let's start with a question. And as many questions are in the current times, this is related to the pandemic that all of us are dealing with now. And I'd like to start with Laura. How do you define, Laura, what the new normal is for you in your current position with United Wholesale Mortgage?
Yeah, definitely the last year and a half and then some has been extremely challenging. I think a piece of the new normal is making sure you adapt to change. And then the biggest is listening to your team members. We have over 8,000 people here at UWM, and everybody has a different perspective, a different experience with COVID. And I try to empower and make sure we have an aligned team of people that put everyone first. So just service-oriented, empathetic. I'm a mom of 2, so when people were with their children homeschooling, it's like I'm in their shoes. So I think the best way that we could take care of people is to make sure that we're always having their ear to the ground and putting everybody first and seeking feedback. So I think a lot of the new normal is genuine care and making
Yeah.
sure that we're very compassionate with what everyone's going through, because we have a different experience.
Laura, I think it's the same at the university here at Michigan State. There is a degree of caring and compassion that is more explicit now than probably any time in the 20 or so years that I've been here, which of course is a wonderful thing to surface. But at the same time, it's coming at a very considerable cost. Are many people at United working remotely?
We have a unique model where we don't have any remote work. Last year, having to send everybody home, but then once regulations change, bring everybody back. Again, I think it's a sensitive process and making sure that people are comfortable. So we made sure that we took a tremendous amount of care, brought people back slowly, and then now the day-to-day here, making sure that people feel good. And that is even upping the resources among our HR team, which we call team member services, because service alignment is everything, so much so that we changed the name of it. So making sure that we beefed up our own team to take better care of our team members, whether they're on our campus. I think we're lucky to have 1.5 million square feet of office space. We have generous area, but in the new normal of work from home, we selected to not follow that. We came back to what makes us strong is all being here on campus together. So it's a bit of a difficult process, but now it's part of our day-to-day, and we have to stay on the pulse of team members' needs as we go through that.
Thank you. I wanted to ask Ron Moore a question. Ron, you've had a long career with HP, Hewlett-Packard, and then more recently with nonprofit organizations, especially Safe Horizon in New York City. And I know with HP, you would have dealt with crisis communication situations. I'm wondering about Safe Horizon as well, and the nonprofits that you've been affiliated with and that you have played leadership roles in. Can you talk to us about your experiences with crisis communication planning and how you are able to not exactly anticipate crises, but plan for dealing with them when they happen?
Mhm. I think back as to one of the big crises that Hewlett-Packard had was the very first time we laid off employees, because that was unheard of in Hewlett-Packard culture. And that took a lot of planning. What you have to do is really be able to put yourself in the shoes of your other employees and understand how and where they get their messages from and how it's received. And you really have to have a multimodal message. You just can't put out an email and think everybody's gonna get it. And I think the other part of it is that them being responsive, because there's always going to be things that you didn't predict. And so you have to build in a feedback mechanism and a flexibility to respond real time, because it's always going to be, you just can't plan for everything, but you want to be able to have a team or so forth that's actually assigned to dealing with the unexpected.
Gary, you recently have retired from Raytheon, and this is another very large corporation. How has COVID-19 changed the future of the industry that Raytheon is in and the sectors in which you've worked?
Yeah, I would say, very similar to what Laura said, and probably not too unique to other technology and manufacturing, because we're kind of a mix. We're really kind of high tech, but we make stuff too. So we have factories, and then we have large amounts of folks who would work in an office environment. And really we've evolved to really a hybrid model. And I think that's going to be the model going forward. So all of our learning experience in the last year with sending everyone home, some people had to stay because of the nature of factory work or other work that we do. And then people began coming back, and really the approach was very specific. Work groups or departments could determine it. And then because we are, to your point, we are across, I don't know how many states, but probably half the states in the United States and around the world with 174,000 people. So you have this myriad of regulations about what you can and can't do in certain locations about bringing people back to work. So we had to navigate through all that. So the short version is be flexible, and it's pretty customized while giving people, we're trying to give people the maximum options of what they want to do, trying to find the right mix of what Laura said is we really value the collaboration that you do really get at a premium when people are together interpersonally without trying to force it too much, and find a nice mix taking into account the company's needs, customers' needs, and our employees' needs. And it's ever evolving. So Ron said, you know, flexibility, you need resilience. What you do last month might not work this month or last quarter. And that's going to be, I think, that way for maybe forever. So I think that the pandemic for us accelerated a very organic hybrid, what we call hybrid today. We had begun developing organically, and it probably squished that time frame from 10 years into immediately to learn how to do that. And it's a learning process.
Gary, you were vice president for HR at Raytheon, and as you said, Raytheon is a very large corporation. How many locations worldwide?
About 50 locations. Actually, that's 50 in the U.S. Actually, it's about 75 across the world, and of course, in all different kinds of time zones. So, you know, from a communication standpoint as well, and I'm sure the others have dealt with this, you're having to balance when and how, what kind of communication modes work best in certain cultures or certain regions. When you're going to release something simultaneously, what does simultaneously mean when you have a 24-hour, locations? Doing that for not only COVID, but other big things, whether they're crises, and we've had our crises, like, Ronald mentioned, or just big news. Really, I think the learning that COVID actually helped, but also recent times was the work generation today wants their communication in many different modes, pushing out, text messages to cell phones, employee cell phones, embedded video, chat rooms, all kinds of things, and finding and mixing and matching all kinds of communication vehicles to reach employees has accelerated in the last 5 years, but COVID kind of turbocharged the acceleration of multiple modes of communication to employees. And then the thing I think Laura hit on that was so important, receiving feedback, reaching out and getting and actually really valuing employee feedback. So I think we did a good job of being genuine about it. This really put a premium on being, if I could use it, really, really genuine about gathering and using feedback from employees.
Fascinating to hear. Laura, I'm wondering about interpersonal communication in your role and with the people on your team, and especially with difficult topics, difficult HR related topics, personnel topics, and then issues related to something like a pandemic. Are there examples that you can talk about for Spartan students of when interpersonal communication is necessary for what types of topics? So Gary mentioned the importance of feedback, and I'm imagining that for some topics that need or availability of instant feedback probably is essential because either of the sensitivity of the information or the likelihood that communication might be interpreted in wrong ways, and you'd want to be able to correct that on the spot in real time.
I think another unique thing with our model, but a positive of being on site together, is the in-person communication. Like a lot of times things get lost over Zoom, lost over the telephone. So we highly encourage with our ratio of leaders to team members. So we have, on average, we have about 850 leaders in the company today, and they lead between 6 to 10 people on average. So it makes it so you create that bond with your team members. We call our employees team members. We have a lot of sports-based analogies. Our leaders we call captains. So you even think of sports like we're on the field winning with our team members. But every morning we have a huddle, sports again. We have a huddle with our team members. So when you think of that, the leader is surrounded by their 6 to 8 team members. And you're talking about personal needs, you're talking about group needs, and it's face-to-face. And if it's something that is where they need our HR team member services team, how we're open and accessible on the floor. We have somebody assigned to every team at the company. So I think a lot of it is those ratios, and it's high touch, and making sure that it's not just the only communication lives in that huddle, but then we have the sit downs that are dedicated between team members and leaders. So it's really the open accessibility of that, and that people know that this is more than just a workplace. It's a campus. I admire, obviously, Michigan State's campus, and we're modeled here in Pontiac almost to be like a college campus, because like Michigan State and like us, it's a support system. So I think you have to be really diligent and detailed with those touch points and able to show people it's more than a job. So, we're here for needs, but back to what Bear said, you have to listen. You have to listen to it, and you have to be responsive to it, or it's just another workplace. And we try to be really special and relationship oriented with every touch point we have.
Very interesting. Thank you. Ron, you're making me wonder about the differences that you've experienced in communication between the nonprofit world that you've been a leader in, and also the for-profit world, where you've also held leadership positions. Have you seen differences in communication practices that make sense across for-profit and nonprofit contexts?
Yes, and the nonprofit thing is all about the mission. It's all about the client that we're trying to take care of. That is the goal. Real quick story, when I first went to our Bronx office, and there was a portrait of a woman in a wedding gown on the wall, and I thought maybe an employee just got married, and they were like, no, that was a client we had on her wedding day. Her ex-boyfriend jumped out of the bushes and murdered her on the way to her wedding. I knew then I wasn't at Hewlett-Packard. It wasn't about how many printers we sold. It was about how many lives can we save. And so that's just a whole different mindset. And so with that, those employees, they're motivated by serving the client. Yes, they want wages, they want benefits and so forth, but just money alone is not why they're there, because they're in a nonprofit. That's not the main motivator. So that's a big difference between the two.
Are there certain aspects, Ronald, of communication on the flip side of that coin that you see as being pretty similar across these two contexts?
Sure. From an HR perspective, credibility is really the calling card. And whether it's crisis or interpersonal relationship, if HR in larger as a function or you as an individual have credibility, in other words, that their perception is that you are honest broker and so forth, then people are willing to accept a lot of what you have to say, and they're willing to trust and so forth. So in both cases, it's important that HR not only show up when there is a crisis. If you are part of the everyday world and so forth, and people feel that you are vested in their success, and that was true across the board. We in the nonprofit thing, we had domestic violence shelters, so we had 24-hour staff. And I had to make sure that the overnight staff that we had, I would go out to the shelters at 11 o'clock at night and talk to the employees on their terms when they're at work. And so when you step inside their world, it's a lot easier to communicate.
If you remember back, all three of you were in the College of Communication Arts and Sciences and earned degrees, multiple degrees in this college. And many of the students we have today in ComArtSci are considering choices, looking at alternatives, applying to different kinds of organizations for positions. And so it's a really exciting time for them. And some of them will be considering choices between for-profit organizations and nonprofit organizations. I'm wondering if any of you three have advice for students about what types of organizations they might want to focus on.
I take that first. That's helpful. Is as an advertising major, I remember back then of thinking it was so literal. I had to work for an agency, and I did. And then it was eye-opening of the shift of what do you work for, and knowing that I had to be at a place where I made the most difference. How could I serve people? How could I help people? What was my passion? And so I think as a ComArtSci major, regardless of advertising or a different, pointed area, it's really the place that you're most passionate about, where you can make that difference, because curiosity takes you so far. I apply the advertising skills in everything I do, but I think with the curiosity where it's led me in my path, and even being attached to HR, who knew? But I think taking the path and coming up with the place that you're gonna have the highest impact is always gonna be the right thing, and then success comes.
Yeah, I would agree with that. This is Gary, and I would add on to that. As you explore places, find the place that feels and fits the most naturally. You can be your real self. And I know that, being a genuine self has been, kind of cliched, but it's really true, where you can be yourself when you walk in and contribute and have a lot of impact, because there's places where the role might be similar, but the culture is very different, and you may not really fit in as well or feel as comfortable or be able to really give all your passion, like Laura says, and you need the right place and the right role to do it. And sometimes it's harder to define, or if you find one that's a great fit, or maybe find one that's not a great fit, really think about whether you should stay at a place that's not as a really good fit for you, because you probably either will both be unhappy and probably not as successful in your role if you don't really feel comfortable with wherever that employer is.
Yeah, I think also, so you want to try to find alignment with your values. And so whether it's community oriented, whether it's international or educational, so because of our skill set, we can go into a variety of industries. So if there's a particular industry or particular field of work that you're interested in, then look for what are the ComArtSci opportunities within that organization, because we are needed in every organization. And so try to find your niche and then look for what communication needs do they have, and that's what I can bring to the table.
All three of you are making me remember, and maybe our listeners are having the same sort of experience. When I applied for a position at Michigan State University initially, I had a big matrix on the wall, the different organizations I had applied to, attributes listed across the top, the things I liked, the things I didn't know if I liked, and the pluses and minuses I was presuming about each of these possible employers. They were all colleges at that time. And as soon as I came to Michigan State and met the people, Gary, it was exactly as you just described, actually, as all three of you described, in terms of finding the fit, finding a compatible context where you feel good, you feel like you can contribute, you feel like it's going to help you and you can help the organization. And I threw that matrix out because as soon as I found a place that felt right, the emotion took over, and it's worked out great. So I can understand your reactions. I think that's great advice. I'm wondering about persistent change, again, back to our pandemic. And Gary, I wanted to ask you this in particular, because early in your comments, you'd made mention that you believe some of the changes you've seen are going to become permanent or a part of our way of organizing going forward. With large organizations, and maybe specifically, reference to Raytheon, what do you see as persisting that is due to the pandemic?
I think the pace of change, and again, I think it was accelerated because of the change and how we had to change work environments, how we had to change communicating to people, how we went through multiple changes in a very quick cycle over a year, now 2 years. And I think there was already a business cycle because of technology that was driving a pace of change. And so again, that just added to it. So again, it just made it exponential. And so again, communication was the core of having people adapt to, learn how to be resilient. My experience over 30 years is that nearly everybody can deal with even high degrees of change with the right support and practice by doing it. The more you do change, the more you learn about it. But if a company can communicate, here's what to anticipate. What did you learn? How leaders talk about what did we learn? What should we do differently? What should we do more of, less of? And get people ready and let them experience change. And the good, the bad, and the ugly of change, let people experience it. Most people will learn and adapt to that, and they have. Look at how we all adapted. And we said this often, in Raytheon, how are people adapted pretty quickly? People are pretty resilient, have good change capability. So trust them, but communicate with them, engage with them. And I think my co-panelists have said that. The engagement with employees, because we all can learn from each other, and that really accelerates, it's not one person learning, it's 1 times 2 times 5 times 10. And so if you get people really engaged and leaders are really listening, you just take it from there. And I think Ronald early on talked about having people, you can't overplan. So one thing we learned through COVID, at some point, stop planning and let people and trust people, support them. We have good people, support them, give them guidance, and then let them work through the change, because you can't plan yourself through constant change. You can be prepared, but you can also be over prepared. And we had that tendency. So as a technology company, we actually force ourselves to stop planning as much and just letting people learn through things.
Ronald, I see you nodding your head. Is this resonating with you?
It is very much. Change management, I think, is the most critical skill the audience will need. And also, let me say something a little controversial, because I'm not worried about my next job. I heard Carly Fiorina once say at the Hewlett Packard Management seminar, said that, sometimes you have to shoot the strays. Okay, so that you can say, next week, we're going to go to the left. And then you say, remember, day after tomorrow, we're going to the left. Today, we're going to the left. Those that go to the right, you may have to eliminate. And that's what a lot of the COVID mandates and so forth are. You won't ever be able to get 100% of the people to accept your change. So you expand as much as you can, but the goal is never 100%. That's not realistic. And those that choose not to, it is their choice. It is their choice, but your focus is on the organization and what's best for the organization, and you have to then separate.
Laura, do these ideas resonate as well with you, that you're right in the thick of it at United?
Yes, and we're all on site here. Knowing that retaining great people is one thing, but knowing how competitive it is right now. So again, with COVID, everybody has a different stance of what's happened in the world. And when we pulled everybody back, we lost team members. And that hurts us. We consider every team member a part of our family. But I think what's kind of a piece of the new normal of COVID and everything we're going through is the amount of options people have in the war on talent, and thinking about how a great team member that reported here daily can work for a California company today, can work any option because you're doing it from home. So right now, knowing that options are limitless, it's just paramount to take amazing care of your team members right now, show them to make a difference. Engagement, I love the topic of engagement being everything, because engagement is highly successful, happy people that know that they have a hand in our goals and what we're doing, and have a growth pattern here. Making sure you provide in-house options. So if you hire the great people, to retain them as you can grow from within. And we hire for cultural alignment. You have great work ethic and you're positive, like you can grow here. So a lot of these things hit home with me. And then, as Ron said, if our way is not for everybody, then I wish people well in a successful journey, because it is okay. Because you know what negativity can do to a workplace, how disalignment, how that can change the course of you hitting your goals. So yeah, it's definitely a big science. But if you have the right people, the right HR team, the right leaders, it starts with leader alignment to make sure that we're doing the right thing for people to retain the best, and then trying so hard to welcome in the future. It's all very competitive right now.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Laura, I want to stay with you for a moment and ask you about external organizational communication strategy. You're an advertising professional, and you've become a professional of other expertise as well. And with an advertising mindset and a communication message mindset, are there messages? Are there communication content that have become more important now than previously to communicate, especially with external stakeholder groups, key stakeholders of United Wholesale Mortgage? It would seem to me that some aspects of communication strategy probably have changed as a result of this crisis.
Oh yeah, I agree with that. And we went public this year, so in January. So on top of
Wow.
COVID becoming public, we had our successful year ever in a time when everybody's hurting. But with that, we were able to hire over 5,000 people. So we are a very humble, family-oriented company. And I think one of the things that shifted with internal versus external is we do so many amazing things for our community, amazing things for people. And we always kind of had the stance of, we don't need to put that on the marquee. Like, we do the right thing always, but sometimes you don't do the right thing and have to blast it, because then it seems like it's self-serving. You're not doing it for the right purpose. But I think in the last year and a half plus, that you understand that people need that and they want it. So I think taking the amazing things that you're doing and making sure the clients know that, and then it's not just about the product. We're, number one, what we do is a mortgage company, but do they know that we're a family company? Do they know we committed to not laying anybody off during COVID? Do they know, even when you think of Oxford, the tragedy that happened locally, all the things that we're doing for their families? It's that very careful balance of, inside we know this, but it is okay to let that go to the outside externally, because we're all part of this community. And it actually isn't self-serving. It shows that you want to be aligned with people that have the same values and the same vision to do good. So I think that we had a really powerful exercise that COVID provided us, because there is positives to be had out of what we all have gone through and we continue to go through. Because again, to that support system and community, it's not just us at UWM, it's not just our clients, it's community of Pontiac, it's the nation. There's so much more if you welcome everybody into your circle and you openly share. So I think it showed us that, you can be very humble and have that balance.
Thank you. Gary, you also came from a training in advertising and an external focus from an organizational perspective. And then, of course, you became a leader in internal focus with human resources. And so I'm wondering about you, if you see demonstrable changes due to this pandemic in communication strategy, maybe first with external publics and then internally with stakeholder groups.
Yes, and actually I was, as I mentioned earlier, I worked very closely with communications groups and my entire career, and especially at Raytheon, we have an outstanding communications organization that we closely partner with. I would say that they really amped up their external reach, very similar to what Laura said, to say, we do really great things in the community. We're very interested in the community, and we need to just be more out there with that. But we also have a extraordinarily large internal organization, community of employees, and we increase that as well. And we wanted the messages to be in sync. So one of the things sometimes I've seen in the past is where the external message and the internal message aren't really aligned. And so we made sure that those really synced up really well. And they were about what we were doing around the communities, to support communities, what we were doing to provide, COVID-related materials and supplies. But then also we had a message to our customers about our products. Was there going to be product interruption because of COVID shutdowns in our workforce or our factories? And so there was external communication to the customer community around not, kind of dropping the ball on important deliveries to our aerospace and defense customers about, because they really needed, our product and our services. And then, the thing I really think about was, when we had the confluence, really it was in 2020, of COVID and many of the social justice events in our country. And again, we really harnessed our internal groups, which worked in the communities, to really do a lot of external messaging. Again, genuine messaging about what we were doing, how we were already had been out, and now we're out in the community even more, during that kind of unique confluence of activities that were going on, especially last summer. Not last summer, I guess 2 summers ago.
You bring up the critical topic of social and racial equality, and I'd like to ask all three of you if you would comment on this ongoing national conversation and movement, and how this has changed both human resources, but also communication practices and what's necessary in helping employees within companies and nonprofit organizations as well.
Hopefully I can start. I think for us, it's been making sure the team members lead the initiative instead of doing what we think is best, having them have the largest voice of being a part of it. Employee resource groups, and a lot of this I learned from other big companies, but when we started sparking them here, I'm like, what a great idea. And then it starts somewhere, and then team members start asking, can we have a veterans group? Can we, have a women in IT group? It's all these amazing things that, like, yes, you can. And then we empower you, but what do you want to do? What are your goals? And then we can put a budget behind it. We can do more, welcome people from the outside in. So, it's back to, I guess, what has been one of our themes is let the people's voices lead the way and get out of the way and empower them to do great things. And by doing that, we do more, and we have better education and even better resources that our team members even identify outside of our walls to bring in, so we can better educate people. And I think it's just really limitless with the ideas. If anything, I have a hard time keeping up with the great ideas and how we can implement them all.
Yeah, I would echo all that and say, as well, opening and increasing the internal dialogue with employees. They wanted to talk about all that topic, and they wanted to talk about it while they were at work with themselves, with leaders. We have a vast network actually of employee groups that have various constituencies. So facilitating and making available time for groups to talk and intergroup discussions. And for, part of that's just venting, but it's really allowing a dialogue and responding, having leaders respond. But to Laura's point, not having this be company or leader led or directed, or which would give the appearance to be perhaps manipulative, but really genuine listening and letting employees help us decide what we might do or what they could do, as they might be thinking, well, we want to go out in the community and do this. Is this okay? And we're having a conversation about, that 99% of the time, sure, it'd be fine. So again, talking and listening, and the number of dialogue sessions, whether they were virtual or in person or chat room dialogues that we have with employees, and then giving them permission to go out as groups and individuals to go and do good out in the community and help the situation.
I definitely agree with what I've heard so far. And the other thing I want to say is that, we all know that diversity is good for business, and we've been saying that for years. But the same token, diversity has to be viewed as something that everybody can participate in. And I remember bringing in speakers talking about white males and diversity, and that there's diversity among white males. I mean, everybody has a role in it, and that's what you want to be. You want to be inclusive, and so that therefore you can go out to the community, regardless of whether you're indigenous to that community, but you can go out to that community, yeah, and be a part of it. I'll give a shout out to Raytheon. Though years ago, I was on the board of Out and Equal, which is the LGBT organization. And Hewlett Packard, Raytheon, German, we would all compete with who was getting the best packages, best benefit packages, everything. And Raytheon, forget the woman's name, they would come in every year, like, we've got this, we've got that. So Raytheon has been walking that talk for a long time. I just want to give a shout out to them.
I appreciate that, Ron. Yeah.
Ron, have you noticed over the course of your career differences in the willingness of organizations to enter into and to support employee or volunteer initiatives for social and racial equity, a difference between the nonprofit world and the for-profit world?
I think the for-profit world really led the march in all this, because the for-profit world, the focus is on customers and customer service and and profitability, and you want all your customers to be taken care of. You want to be attractive to all, gay people buy cars too, women, they mortgage too. And so for-profit realized that, and they have led in a lot of states legislatively, and what needs to be done is work, because they realize that they want customers come from every segment of the population. And the nonprofit, again, more so focused on on the mission. But in the nonprofit world, you have to also realize then that your message needs to be able to reach a variety of communities. And so, for example, in my Safe Horizon world, when we were dealing with domestic violence, it was a challenge for us to, how do we deliver to domestic violence victims who are highly affluent? They're not going to come to our shelters, but you have to try to say, how do we help those and so forth. So even in a nonprofit world, you got to look at your customer range and come up with different strategies to reach them.
Let me turn to a explicit question for the three of you. I want to start with Laura. And this is for Spartan students, Laura, who are listening or watching and getting ready to enter the job market. I've just been writing letters of reference for students. I've just been talking with students and research assistants who are starting new jobs and finishing term papers, maybe the last term papers they'll ever do, at least for a while. What's the skill set most critical for personal success and advancement?
What I admire the most is people honestly being themselves. I think the resume says so much, but I think we've all been there where you're being something else, like it's on the piece of paper and I've got to deliver for what I think the company wants me to be. But I think, you sift through all that, put the resume aside, and I want to know what drives people, motivates them, what are their goals, how are they different? I want different people here in our universe, people that think differently, that can challenge the why. They can challenge me. They have a different type of curiosity. So I think, that's one of the biggest, driving things is I think, again, can you deliver your best self and your true self? Because the company that you want to be at is somebody that sees you for you and how you can make a difference. There's the skill set, and then I want dynamic people on top of it and how you can cut through that.
Ronald, what do you see as a most desirable skill set for young students getting ready to enter the job market?
The ability to work in a very diverse environment. I think that is a critical piece, and I think Michigan State has given you the excellent start to that. Most of us come to Michigan State and we're put into a world that's very different than the world we came from. Small town, big city, and so forth. And the friends that you've made, the skills that you have acquired to be successful in the Michigan State University will give you a great lead in and to the other world. And I would say also, and maintain those relationships. Then you are starting with the beginning of a network that can serve you the rest of your life or work life. I spent Labor Day weekend with a friend in Napa, California. We were RAs together in Holden Hall. And, and over the years, we've gone through marriages, divorces, or whatever type of thing, and different jobs things, but maintain that network, and it will serve you well, because you're all going to spread out all over the country and the world. And this Michigan State experience, you'll be surprised, will serve you very well.
Ronald,
hey, Ronald, a shout out to Holden Hall.
Okay, lovely. Yep, fine.
And I would say absolutely what both you guys said. So Laura, that being yourself and being a confident self. People want to employ people who are confident in who they are. And I think your point, Ronald, about Michigan State folks have gone to school in a diverse environment, diverse in its broadest sense. And they have learned how to get along, live with, work in group projects with a vast majority of people. That is a differentiator. And the last thing I would say that I love about Michigan State people is Michigan State people know how to get stuff done. I'll say it that way. We get stuff done. You want people who get stuff done. Michigan State people. So find a way to market all those things and communicate those things to your employers, because they want confident people who can get along with other people and who can get stuff done.
Yeah.
Now, we have a lot of students here, of course. It's a big university. It's a big college within a big university. We have a number of students who are freshmen, are sophomores, or juniors, and they still have time to take additional courses. And so sometimes we're in the position of maybe advising, but also asking students about their own likes and what might best help them on what might become a career path. And so we get into the discussion or the game of thinking of communication and what's a topic, what's a skill, what's a body of knowledge that you might still, while you're at MSU, you might still be able to learn about and develop an expertise in, like health. Maybe it's engineering, maybe it's nursing, but communication and education, or communication and mathematics. And so I'm wondering in part if you, when you're interviewing potential new employees or meeting them within your organizations, are there particular skills other than communication that you see as very helpful?
I'll dive in. And there's a number, but I'll dive in two. There's a lot of data out there, so get some exposure to analytical skills and being able to do some analysis, because there's so much data out there. You got to be able to sort through fact and fiction and come to the right conclusions versus erroneous conclusions. So analytical. And the other thing I would say, and this may be a predilection I have, is business orientation. Even if you're a nonprofit, it's running as a business, as a nonprofit organization. So there's business aspects of running organizations and how they're successful, and getting some knowledge of how organizations work, business skills. Two that I think of.
Yeah, I'll add to that, because as a creative, I think I thought, well, if I'm a creative, then I definitely can't be a numbers person. So I wish I could have focused more heavily on economics and finance. And I think I created my own barrier with that, of I can't do that. And I even catch myself sometimes today of like when I'm having budgeting conversations preparing for 2022 of like something just shuts down and I'm like, you can't shut down. Like, yeah, I need that too. I need you here. And another thing I'd add is public speaking.
Yes.
If I could have focused more on that, I spent so much of my life terrified of being in front of other people. And maybe it's even the confidence piece of what if I say the wrong thing? What if I don't say it well enough? And then that triggers, that sick feeling until you start at some point in your career, if you invest in it and you get through that barrier of, well, maybe people want to hear what I have to say. And maybe I'm an authority in what I have to say. And maybe if I forget saying something, they don't know what I'm forgetting to talk about, and maybe they're my shoes of interest. Because when I see somebody speak, I'm like, oh, they're so great and dynamic. And I make sure I tell people that, because maybe they didn't have the confidence that it took me so long to try to gain being in front of people.
I would definitely echo this. Almost like face your fears.
Yeah.
Because, and just like what Gary said, one of the classes, the courses that have helped me the most have been my statistic classes. That ability to analyze. But I'll throw out one more skill that I wish I had picked up, and bilingual. If you can be bilingual, Spanish, Chinese, whatever, if you can be bilingual, that will definitely be a plus on anybody's resume. And so if you got a chance to take some electives, pick a language, you can obviously practice it in different parts of the culture, because when you can speak another language, then you're seeing the world in a different way. We say what time it is. In Spanish, is what hour is it? So you just will expand your horizon, and particularly employers that are international, being bilingual is a real plus.
Excellent. Thank you so much. I see Matthew Jones, our host here, has reemerged. Matthew, do we have some questions in the chat?
We do, yes. And so I'm going to combine two, because the same person asked and referenced that they're somewhat related. Jumping back into the pandemic a bit, it really exposed the importance of HR professionals within organizations and the quote unquote real work that they do. How did your companies adjust to the growing demand for and or retention of HR professionals?
This is Gary. By any means possible. You got to combine the reality we found is you had to combine, economic, but also connecting to people, making them feel part of a team, valuing it. Sounds cliche, but really engaging with them, giving them real responsibilities, giving them leadership experiences, and but making sure your pay, benefits, or working conditions are really good.
I guess I'll add to that is reminding them how much they matter, and that it's never systematic. So however many touch points they're having in a day and a week, every touch point is making a difference for somebody. So I now manage their goals and their success by touches. How many people did you touch today? How many conversations did you have? And for them to slow down and recognize that you matter so much. And I never want us to be numb to that. And if you're having bad days and you're sad, it's okay to feel that way. Knowing that sometimes they talk to team members that don't agree with them, that is okay. Explain the why, educate. You're an educator. So a lot of it isn't just empowerment and recognizing them as individuals. And as you lose people, making sure that doesn't take the team down, because again, it's a competitive environment. And I kind of think, okay, if you do a good job and you have a great HR team, well, people are going to come after your team. So kudos to you. You're doing a good job. But how do you retain people and make sure they definitely know the difference that they make?
I just want to say my hats off to my counterparts, because you're in a world that I never lived in. When I go down the street, every place I see says we're hiring. That's a whole different world. So kudos to you guys.
Thanks.
And Laura, I really, what you said, I think is the most important thing that I've learned is acknowledging how important everyone is and making sure they hear that, because it's true. And they are more so than ever. I think that's the most important thing I've learned and experienced, in my HR career, especially in recent times.
Yes, and it's recognizing the small things. When we were wearing masks,
Yes.
we can't smile at each other. We're a hugging environment. You can't hug. You
Yes.
have to find alternates for those kind of things to show the genuine appreciation for lifting up other people and taking care of other people. We're the caretakers.
Yes, as I used to joke with my folks, HR people are people too.
Yeah.
And remembering that, especially during, COVID, it was, I think, especially tough on HR folks, and that, showing the love was really important. Is really important.
I have one other question that came in, and this, I'm going to reframe it a little bit. The person describes a scenario where they are surveying employees within the company, and it seems like the responses of those surveys seemingly don't impact or create any change within where the company that this is an individual works. How would you navigate that? And how would you also then advocate for your employees on the other side of that coin?
I can jump in quickly. Feedback comes from so many devices. So there's the surveys, you could read Glassdoor feedback, exit interviews. We collect it from people that are here and even as people go. And then there's those trends, and the trends to not ignore. And it doesn't mean we can solve everything for everybody, but we have to jump quickly to, again, explain the why. That's kind of our phrase here. If we're not explaining why behind what we do, and we received your idea, but this is why we can't adapt to it. We as leaders have to take ownership of that. And then for people to know the clarity and transparency that if that then makes it seem like this is not the company for you, then we fully owned our stance on things. So I think a lot of it is the communication not falling on deaf ears.
To me, it sort of comes back to the basic communication model, in the sense of that when you get that feedback, then you take that feedback and then you apply that, you massage your message. So that the next survey has to be built into how will you know what we're going to do, or we will commit to you that we will have follow-up sessions with here's what you said, here's what we can do, here's what we can't do, and so forth. So take that feedback and incorporate it and make the next survey even more responsive.
Yeah, and lastly, I would add, and I think you guys hit it exactly in the head, is today there are so many vehicles to get feedback. That you can do it, and you should do it in a multitude of ways, because it gives you a much richer set of feedback. But if you've had enough feedback and you know what you're going to do, stop asking for feedback, because if you're not going to listen to this next set, that's just going to make people angry because you didn't listen to their message. So at some point, I used to say, stop surveying if we already have enough responses. Yeah. But get the richness of responses that it's so readily available today.
Phenomenal. Well, those are the questions that we had from our great group of attendees today. I would like to thank all of you for your time. Dr. Deering, thank you for being our moderator today, and each of you for taking the time out of what we know are your very, very busy schedules. For our attendees today, Thank you also for attending and tuning in. If you're looking to get involved with the college, please feel free to check out our Get Involved website and fill out our alumni engagement survey. I'll put that in the link here or in the chat here shortly. And please check back and keep an eye out for any of our future virtual talks and other alumni engagement programs from the College of Communication Arts and Sciences. Again, I want to thank all of you for taking the time. And of course, as we like to end, go green.
Go white.
Bye.
White.